Fusion Cuisine. Just a fair warning, there will be spoilers in this review. Do I need to keep saying that? Someone let me know in the comments if I need to keep saying that each episode. Anyway, Fusion Cuisine. A fusion episode if you couldn't guess by the title. Though you really wouldn't guess it from the opening. As the episode starts out, Steven is spending some time with Connie at Steven's house. They're watching a show called Under the Knife, which seems to be a kind of over-the-top medical drama kind of show, and Connie mentions that her mother, being a doctor, doesn't let her watch it since the medical stuff in the show is actually very inaccurate, which is why I didn't go into quantum physics, because if I did, I wouldn't be allowed to let my kids watch Star Trek should I ever have kids, and quite frankly, that's just not a life I would want for them. And there's a nice little bit of continuity here with Connie having her glasses kind of placed up on her head rather than actually wearing them, because even though she did keep them, she did pop the lenses out and keep them back in Indirect Kiss. Since that episode, she doesn't need to wear them anymore since her vision is repaired. And then it starts. Connie gets a call from her mother, and she instinctually puts the glasses back on. She talks to her mom, giving her yes ma'ams and yes ma'ams and yes ma'ams, which is perfectly fine. If your parents want you to be respectful to them, that is entirely understandable. And I can certainly see where her parents overreact, because in this next scene, which is one of my all-time favorites, she asks to talk to Steven's mother. And the only gem handy is Garnet, so they give the phone to Garnet, and she says what I think is one of the funniest things in the entire series. She says, "The children are playing swords. Oh, I'm sorry, they're playing with swords. Oh no, they're dead. Don't ever call here again." And she says it in that same calm monotone that she says everything, and then she says, "I'm sorry, I panicked." It's not the words so much that are funny, it's the delivery that's funny. Garnet, master of comedy. Anyway, this rightfully freaks Connie's mom right out. So she demands dinner with Steven's parents, which is a problem because Connie lied to her parents and told them that Steven has a regular nuclear family. That being the typical idea of a family with a mother and a father and the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. No, wait, that's 50's sitcom family. They're mostly the same thing. So anyway, now we get this plot where Steven has to decide who to take to dinner with him, since he does technically have 3 mothers, not just one, even if Amethyst doesn't typically act like a mother. So obviously he's going to take Greg, and then he wants to take one of the gems. So he actually lines them up, as if profiling them, and then runs down their traits. Pearl is the most motherly, so she'd obviously be the best one to take, but she doesn't eat food. Garnet's a badass, but she doesn't really talk to people very much. And Amethyst is... oh god, Amethyst, no. No. Please stop. So finally, he decides on the most ridiculous course of action to ask them to all fuse together and come together. Only Steven universe. So Greg and Steven show up to dinner at this sort of outdoor patio area to, I guess, a seafood restaurant, I think it was, with a giant 6-armed space alien. This is Alexandrite, the fusion of Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst, and she's really cool. Her design is freaking awesome. She's got 2 faces, 2 mouths specifically. As I mentioned, she has 6 arms. Her color palette is very alien, very cool, very reminiscent of like an Ultraman or something. And she's unique amongst fusions that we've seen so far because the minds of the component gems don't actually mesh much at all inside of her. They're all just kind of floating around in there together, which kind of speaks to the fact that the 3 gems, the 3 core gems, are not the best team in reality. They don't really gel as well together as I think they used to when Rose was around. But that's a subject for an entirely different video, so I'm just going to move on. Anyway, bizarrely enough, the Maheshwarans are entirely accepting of Alexandrite. They just kind of treat her like another person, which is great, don't get me wrong, but seriously? Have they met many 25-foot women before? It strains credibility even a little more than this show typically does. Also, we can get some cringe-inducing humor, and we get some scenes showing that where Connie is very fluid in the language of lying to her parents, Steven just doesn't know how to lie to people at all. It's freaking hilarious. And this scene doesn't go on for too long. Eventually, the Amethyst part of Alexandrite keeps wanting to eat food. The Pearl part of Alexandrite keeps not wanting to eat food. Alexandrite actually ends up literally fighting herself very, very briefly, and then pop goes the fusion. Cool little moment here, by the way. This is the first time we see Ruby and Sapphire. If you freeze frame as Alexandrite is defusing, you can see that for just a second, Ruby and Sapphire also defused before fusing back into Garnet. And Pearl is a total drama queen, literally crawling up to Steven, whining about almost having had to eat food. And the Maheshwarans are freaked right out, obviously, even though you would think they would have been more freaked out about the giant woman than the three relatively normal-sized women, but whatever. But rather than, like, expressing fear, they start to, like, scold Connie for lying to them. And I get it, strict parents are strict. I had a very strict father. But I can tell you one thing that even strict parents aren't supposed to do. They're not supposed to say things specifically to make their children feel bad about themselves. And that's what Connie's mom does in this episode. It's actually throughout the scene and a later scene. But the point is, while what she's saying on the surface sounds good, the way she's saying it and the way that she expects Connie to respond is very antithetical to the way a parent should interact with their child, even a strict parent. She says, I do this because I love you, not to reinforce that point to Connie, but to make Connie feel bad for doing this horrible thing that she has done by lying and taking that love for granted. Does that make sense? I'm just going to move on as if that makes sense. So anyway, Steven and Connie decide they're going to run away together. Well, Connie basically decides for them that they're going to run away together. And I honestly believe that if the gems hadn't refused into Alexandrite and chased them down, they would have just run off somewhere and lived out their lives together. But of course the gems do refuse. They chase down the bus with Steven and Connie on it, and hopefully don't kill anyone in the process, and bring them back to the restaurant, and we have a little bit of a coda at the end with the Maheshwarans seeing that Greg and the gems are actually good parents, and coming to accept Steven's familial situation. And the episode's kind of meh. It's not great, but it's not bad. I feel like the writing here wasn't quite what they intended. I feel like they wanted Dr. Maheshwaran to seem more like the typical strict parent rather than the almost borderline emotionally abusive parent that she actually comes off as. I feel like that was just an issue with the dialogue writing, unless she really is intended to be that way, in which case I really need to rethink some things. But overall, not a bad episode. There was some humor in it that worked, and Alexandrite's design is really cool. I wish it had debuted in an episode where there was some action, but really that's just nitpicking. And we got some cute Connie and Steven moments, which I will never, ever complain about. Overall, there's not much more to say about it. It's a typical episode of the show. But guys, what did you think of this episode if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.